Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the life, the legacy, and the absolute genius of Franz Beckenbauer. We're talking about the German legend affectionately known as Der Kaiser. This is the guy who literally made defending cool, completely changing how the beautiful game is played. You see, before him, defenders were basically just there to destroy. But because of him, defenders learned how to create.
Okay, let's jump right in with this hilarious quote from a New York Cosmos executive back during Beckenbauer's stint in America in the late 70s. The exec literally barked, "Tell the Kraut to get his ass up front. We don't pay $1 million for a guy to hang around in defense." I mean, it's funny, right? But it perfectly captures just how profoundly misunderstood his revolutionary playstyle was to people who were just used to the traditional old-school game. He was technically a defender, but he for sure didn't play like one.
So, that brings us to the big mystery we're unpacking today. How exactly does a nominal defender become football's very first true global superstar, standing right up there alongside massive names like Pelé and Johan Cruyff? Why did kids all over the world suddenly want to grow up and play in the backline?
All right, let's kick things off with Chapter 1, the slap that changed football. Every legend has an origin story, right? And Beckenbauer's features what is arguably one of the wildest sliding doors moments in all of sports history. So, young Franz grew up in Gießen, which was a massive 1860 Munich stronghold, and it was his absolute childhood dream to play for them. But at age 13, while playing against his beloved 1816 youth tournament, an opposing center back wasn't exactly playing nice. He actually slapped Franz across the face right in the middle of the game. In a total flash of youthful pride, and honestly, who could blame him? Beckenbauer rejected 1860 right then and there. He marched straight over to their local rivals, a much smaller club at the time called Bayern Munich, and, well, the rest is history. Without that single impulsive reaction to a slap on the pitch, the mighty Bayern Munich dynasty as we know it today might literally never have existed.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Inventing the Attacking Libero.
Once he hit the professional pitch with Bayern, he didn't just play the game, he spearheaded this massive tactical revolution that left opponents completely baffled. Back then, a traditional sweeper was a super rudimentary stay-at-home defender. Their one and only job was to just clear the ball, stay back, and strictly man-mark the opposition. Beckenbauer completely shattered that mold. He played what's known as the Libero role, roaming totally freely into the midfield, initiating attacks, and essentially acting as a deep-lying playmaker. When you watch modern ball-playing defenders today, think of John Stones stepping into midfield for Man City or Virgil van Dijk launching those pinpoint crossfield passes, you are literally watching the direct descendants of the style Beckenbauer invented. He proved once and for all that the attack doesn't have to start with the midfielders. It can start from the absolute deepest point on the pitch.
So what exactly is a libero? By definition, it's exactly that, a sweeper who dictates the tempo from behind the defense but aggressively steps up to join the offense. Because he didn't have those strict man-marking duties tying him down to a single forward, Beckenbauer used this unbelievable spatial awareness and supreme elegance on the ball to essentially gift his team an extra man in midfield whenever they had possession. He would just glide past pressing forwards, effortlessly breaking lines and turning defense into a lethal attack in seconds.
And if you want concrete proof of his offensive impact, get a load of this number, 96. He scored 96 senior club goals, plus another 14 for the West German national team. I mean, that is an absolutely unheard of number for a nominal defender. He wasn't just casually passing the ball sideways to play it safe. He was an active, lethal threat in the final third, regularly finishing off the exact same moves he had started 70 yards back down the pitch.
And all that dominance, it resulted in a record that is still standing today, 2. To this very day, Franz Beckenbauer remains the only defender in the entire history of the sport to win the Ballon d'Or twice, claiming football's ultimate individual prize in 1972 and again in 1976. In an era that was completely dominated by flashy goal scorers, he emphatically proved that you could orchestrate and completely control a game from the backline.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Blood, Sweat, and World Cups. Now, for all the talk about his elegance, those gliding runs, and his Kaiser nickname, Beckenbauer was, at his core, an absolute warrior. Just look at his explosive arrival at the 1966 World Cup. As a 20-year-old phenom, he scored 4 goals in the tournament. He was so intensely feared by the English squad that manager Alf Ramsey told Sir Bobby Charlton that Beckenbauer was literally the only person who could stop them. So in the final, these two absolute titans of the game were actually tasked with man-marking each other, essentially canceling each other out for the entire grueling match. But honestly, his most iconic display of pure grit has to be the 1970 World Cup semifinal against Italy, the legendary match of the century. Picture this, with 70 minutes gone in a totally brutal, exhausting clash. Beckenbauer suffers a dislocated shoulder and a fractured collarbone after a really heavy foul. But West Germany had already used all their substitutions. Refusing to leave his team hanging with just 10 men in the blazing Mexican heat, he played the remaining 50 minutes of extra time with his arm heavily strapped to his chest in a makeshift sling. It was just this heroic, defining image that cemented his legacy forever. He wasn't just a brilliant tactician, the guy was unbreakable.
And then we hit his absolute peak. He didn't just participate in great teams, he captained them. He single-handedly dragged his squads to the ultimate prizes. He led West Germany to the 1972 Euro and then the '74 World Cup on home soil. At the exact same time, he captained Bayern Munich to an astonishing 3 consecutive European Cups from '74 to '76. He was the foundational, unwavering pillar of 2 simultaneous, world-conquering dynasties. Just incredible.
Let's shift gears a bit. Chapter 4: Tactical Genius in the Dugout.
You see, Beckenbauer's mind for the game was so profound that it translated flawlessly when he swapped his cleats for a manager's coat. He essentially popularized this highly innovative 3-5-2 formation that completely shifted tactical paradigms. And why does this matter? Well, it gave his team a super robust 3-man defensive core anchored by a sweeper, ensuring total security at the back. It brilliantly overloaded the midfield with 5 players, which virtually guaranteed numerical superiority to just suffocate opponents and control the ball. Plus, in attack, it utilized energetic wingbacks to provide wide outlets and dangerous crosses. It was perfectly balanced, highly adaptable, and an absolute nightmare for opposing managers to try and figure out.
And wow, did his system work to perfection on the biggest stage. By winning the 1990 World Cup as a manager, Beckenbauer cemented his legendary status even further. He became one of only 3 men in history, alongside Mario Zagallo and Didier Deschamps, to win the World Cup as both a player and a manager. He proved that his tactical mastery was so deeply ingrained, it worked just as effectively from the sidelines as it did right in the middle of the pitch.
All right, Chapter 5: Beckenbauer versus the purists. Let's get into the ultimate debate.
So today, data analysts and football purists absolutely love to debate this. Who is the ultimate defensive GOAT? Usually, it boils down to a pretty stark contrast in philosophies. On one hand, you have Franz Beckenbauer, the transcendent innovator who demanded offensive freedom and dictated the flow of the entire game. Pitted against him in these debates is usually AC Milan legend Paolo Maldini, the ultimate defensive perfectionist. Maldini played in rigid, strictly structured defensive systems, and his anticipation was so flawless that in over 1,000 professional matches, he received exactly 3 red cards. Maldini famously believed that if he had to make a tackle, he had already made a mistake.
To actually put some numbers to this debate, the analysts at Squawka ran a really fascinating data simulation. They took both players in their absolute primes and dropped them into an equivalent modern high-pressing 4-3-3 system. The results? Pretty telling, actually. When forced to play as a strict modern center back, without that sweeping, roaming freedom he loved, Maldini naturally dominates. The simulation shows Maldini generating 21 clean sheets over a season, compared to Beckenbauer's 16. Maldini's pure, uninterrupted focus on defending the penalty area really shines through here.
And here's the crucial takeaway from that data. Maldini also edges out Beckenbauer in the expected goals differential per 90 minutes. Maldini sits at plus 1.15, while Beckenbauer is at plus 0.92. What this shows us is that in a strict, modern highline, Maldini's pure, elite defensive focus provides a slightly greater net benefit to a team's overall defensive rigidity than Beckenbauer's attacking contributions from the back.
So, what's the final verdict for our explainer today? Well, it really depends on what you personally value in the sport. Maldini is the ultimate pure defender. He perfected the very precise art of stopping the opposition without the ball. But Beckenbauer, he was the transcendent innovator who completely revolutionized what a defender could do when he actually had the ball at his feet. He had the vision and the audacity to dictate an entire match from deep.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. When we look back at the history of sports, is true greatness found in flawlessly perfecting an existing role or in having the sheer audacity to completely reinvent it? Der Kaiser certainly chose the latter. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.